buttons have been pushed. Hey,
Oh boy.
everybody. Welcome. It is Friday, which means you get to listen to me and Tegan talk about some things for a little bit. We are having a conversation today about how you'll brainstorm your next big thing. One of the key, foundational ideas for what we're doing with the NADA conference and the guided coaching aspect of it is that you're going to focus on a big thing for a 12-week period, but that assumes that you know what the heck you're going to do. So we're going to talk today about a process for brainstorming what that thing is and give you the steps for it. And I think what we might do toward the end is I'll even give an example of something that I've been working through and the decisions that I've made relative to that for what I should be working on next. Hi, Tegan.
Hi, how are you today?
Fine. I've had my tacos.
You're
I
good.
I went to
Yeah.
Fuzzy's, which is not my
Ooh.
favorite taco place. It's a little
Mm.
corporate. They're out of Dallas, but we've eaten it, and now I feel ready and raring to go.
You got Taco Bellies. Okay, well that's good.
Yeah,
I I can't concur because it's like 11 o'clock in the morning over here, so I haven't had tacos yet today.
it's
So,
never too early for tacos. They're called breakfast
I
tacos.
well, I
Um,
know this is true.
so so we're gonna get into it, and I thought I would start by telling a story. And I will say, guys, for those of you who can only be here for a minute, go to clio.com/new normal, and there is an ebook that you can download there called Designing Your New Normal. We're pulling some of the stuff from that ebook and applying it to this specific circumstance. So if you don't have time to hang out with me and Tegan as we talk through this process, then just go to clio.com/new normal and you can download that ebook there and you can revisit it. So before we get into that, I have a story to tell you. Last night,
Mm.
Ellie, so we have 4 kids, and number 2 is Ellie. And Ellie is 17, and she is a handful. And this last year, so she's been homeschooled, and what she was doing was doing virtual school, like doing community college. So she was taking community college classes while homeschooled. Well, she decided that she doesn't like online classes, and then the pandemic hit, and so she took essentially this last however long off, like almost a year. She just was like, online schools for losers. I'm not doing that. So she referred to her senior year. Somebody asked her, like, what are you doing this year? She's like, I'm taking a gap year. I'm like, you don't get to say things like that when you're 17. That's not how this works. Um, so she went through a program where through the community college you can get a GED, so you can get high school credentials, and it's a really cool program. Anyway, the point is, they do a graduation, like an actual, you walk cap and gown, whatever. We were not allowed to go because of COVID. It's a whole drama thing. But afterwards, I was forced to go to Cheesecake Factory.
Oh,
I'll appreciate Cheesecake Factory for the cheesecake, but the food is overpriced and it's not very good. But whatever, I do what I'm told. So we're sitting in Cheesecake Factory, and I asked my daughter, what are you planning to do now? You've graduated high school. This is a question everybody's going to ask you. What are you doing now? And she said, I'm going to take a gap year. And I was like,
wasn't this last year your gap year?
another one? Like, how many of those do you get? And she said she's going to take a gap year. And I was like, well, what are you going to do during that time? Are you like trying to focus on making money and being able to whatever? And she says, no, I want to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Now, this relates to what we're talking about now because, as we've discussed before,
Hmm.
the whole core to this program is getting to the right horizon, right? Like the appropriate distance for planning, for being able to get something done. And very specifically, we are not trying to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Brian Clark, we've got an interview coming up that I did with Brian Clark. Of copy blogger fame and now further, and he talks about a career in which you think of your career as projects. Like, you do a thing, you do it awesome, you do the next thing, and that's sort of what we're doing. So we're talking about we're going to pull some of the principles from design thinking. The a couple of guys who were some of the founders in that area, they recently wrote a book called Designing Your Work Life that brings some of these principles in. So we're going to pull those in as well. Yeah? Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah. I yep, I'm all about it. I love
Okay.
design thinking.
So I will frame this, and then I'll turn it to you to lead us through this outline through this conversation. The thing there are four things that they said are core to in that designing your work life, but to design in general. They are get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story. So those four things of being curious, talking to people, trying stuff, and telling your story, that is their elevator pitch version of what design applied to life is. And so we're going to talk through that. So you're in charge.
Fair enough. Oh, I'm in charge.
You're in charge.
That's all this pressure here. Okay. Well, let's talk about using design methods in the law firm setting because I mean, it's different. Law firms are different.
It is, and it's a bit. So I was watching the guy Don Norman, I think is his name. He wrote the Design of Everything, Everyday Things, and he was talking
Mm-hmm.
about how design thinking and systems thinking work together. And it's nerdy, and you don't care. But the point is, systems thinking has to deal with complexity. Like you've got a bunch of players involved and a bunch of interests, and you hear this from law firms all the time, lawyers all the time. Is they're like, I can't help what the court says. I can't help I can't get anybody to show up to work on time. The clerk is annoying. The way we're supposed to file things. The legislation is not my fault. There are a lot of things that are out of our control. And what Don Norman said that was really interesting was he said design purposefully is short. It's like, I want this door to open appropriately. And so I'm going to think of the very narrow problem of getting the door to open appropriately. So life planning is inherently complex. I heard somebody else say essentially design thinking is a terrible thing to use when doing life planning because you don't know who the freak you are in a couple of years, much less 20 years. So Ellie's thing, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, assumes that she knows every option and knows herself infinitely well, so she can decide now what the rest of it is. Well, the way we're dealing with that is by shortening the horizon. So we're going to use design thinking principles, but not to design your life. We're going to design a quarter. We're going to do what Brian Clark talked about and think in these projects. And so give yourself the permission to know that it might not work, to use a Seth Godin'ism. You're going to come up with something. It's going to be a thing that based on the rubric we're going to talk through and that you're going to define, you're going to say, this is the thing I'm working on, but be okay. It's a quarter, right? Like worst case
Right.
scenario, you keep your business going, you keep growing, you've got all the growth of time and you're getting referrals and you're doing good work and all that. You're going to try a cool thing and it could totally bomb and blow apart, and that's okay. It's not the rest of your life. It is a short project. That's what design is for. That's what we'll talk through. Yeah?
Yeah. Yep. I'm 100% behind that. I mean, to your point, like trying stuff is like all about it. Like I had a life plan growing up that I was going to do certain things by certain mile markers. I'm sure we all are like that, right? Like, oh, I'm going to graduate college by the time I'm 24 and I'm going to have my first kid by the time I'm whatever. I'm going to get married when I'm this time. And then life literally laughs in your face and is like, oh, really? Watch this. We're going to do it this way.
Yeah, the waitress sort of
So,
laughed at the idea of Ellie taking a gap year to figure out the rest of her life. And I was like, I don't know. I went to law school when I was 30. I think I took a ton of gap years. So yes. And to do this, I'm going to share my screen real quick. So this
yeah.
is the actual, this is from the Clio piece. This is from the Designing Your New Normal piece. And we're going to talk through this double diamond method. This comes from
Mm,
design. So it essentially, just to give the briefest walkthrough, is you start with just this crazy infinite number of opportunities, things that you could do. So if you're standing at the beginning of your quarter and you're thinking, what can I do? Well, there's just a crazy amount. And we're going to go through this process where you think big, you focus on a problem, you think big again, you focus on a solution, then you get to the specific outcome. Does that make sense?
yeah, for sure. It's a
Yeah, you
great
don't
way
have to do
to
all the things. Don't do all the
no.
things.
And I think that's where a lot of us have problems is we try to think in that big broad picture of, oh my gosh, I have to do everything and I have to balance all these things. But in reality, we just need to focus on one thing that gets us closer to that end result.
Right.
Referring back to like our 12-week year thing, like we keep that big overarching goal in mind at the end and like what project can we work on that helps us get closer to that overarching goal at the end.
Right, and we'll
Right.
so to talk people through these 4 steps, and we'll go through them individually. But let me give you guys a quick overview. If you look at this, you can see the shape of the 2 diamonds, and what this refers to is: do you have big open box thinking, or are you narrowing down? Right, divergent thinking or analysis means I'm going through all the stuff. Right, I'm going through all the different ideas, all the different options. And I'm open. I'm just dumping. I'm brain dumping. And then convergent thinking means that you're focusing again. So in the discover and the define phases, you can see at the top it says you're defining the problems, right? So in talking
Right.
about the problems, and we'll dig into this, what we're really talking about is your why. What, like, why are you creating this thing that is a solution? It's got to be tied to a problem. So we're going to think broadly about the problems we could solve, and then narrow in on them in that synthetic thinking, convergent thinking, which is that second phase. And then once you get to a problem, you're going to do the same thing again. You're going to brain dump. You're going to have divergent thinking again about how might we solutions, right? How might we solve this? What are different ways that we could fix this problem? You're just brain dumping. And then again, in the deliver at the end, you're going to go convergent again, do synthesis again. But the key with this structure is to come to one problem and one solution set, right? Like your focus, your
Right.
X, Y, your 1 point on a graph. One problem, one solution, and the other is you really got to know when to think big and when to think focused. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. And the beautiful thing, I guess, about this thing, I mean, you can do it as many times as you want.
sure.
And you can test these things. If it goes wrong, cool, go back to the double diamond method. Or if you recorded yourself going through this and you have all those problems still right there in your face and the solutions all right there in your face, you can be like, okay, well, I still am working on this problem, but that solution didn't work. Okay, back to the drawing board. Here's 15 other solutions that I thought about. What's the next best solution? Let's focus on that and narrow in on that solution next and test
Right.
that. That's the beauty of having that all mapped out right there. But it also
Indeed.
gives you the space to um, like to I guess paraphrase that thing, like there's no such thing as a stupid answer. Like it lets you have that creative freedom to brainstorm literally anything.
Yeah, what's the cliche? If you want to see a good idea, find all the bad ideas, right? And
Right.
getting back to the 4 things that the design guys said you have to do. The first thing is to get curious, right? To just be out there
Absolutely.
and try things. So what we'll do is we're going to start problem first. So if we go back to this visual, we're going to start with this problem area, which is that first diamond. And the reason just to get nerdy with Nietzsche here, he said basically, I can deal with any how as long as I know the why. And so by focusing on the problem first, that's what we're going to do. We're going to figure out the why. So the way you address this is you just brain dump. So and the way that I would encourage you to do this, again, thinking back to the design guys, they said specifically talk to people. So notice things and talk to people. You get curious and you talk to people. Generally, when you're doing these sort of brainstorming sessions, what you want to do is bring in anybody who is a stakeholder is often the term that's used, but anybody who just sort of gives a crap about whatever it is, the bundle of problems that your firm, your business, you're trying to solve. If you're trying to figure out something that you could do, so say you're me and I don't run a firm anymore, but I want to come up with an idea for a book that I want to write, for example. I might bring in people I might bring in my mom, I might bring in my wife, I might bring in my best friend, I might bring in people who study in the different areas that I care about, just nerds, people who care about the same things. Bring in people, talk to them, and what you're going to do is you'll sit down, and usually what they like to do is set a timer. So you figure out for yourself, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to just dump. And I'm putting down all the problems that I see in the world that I could solve. So problems, getting to a law firm, a problem might be, what's driving me crazy is that filing things is just taking too long. Getting money collected from clients is just taking too long and it's too rare. Maybe I want to start billing flat and I haven't really looked into that. Like, what does it take to do flat fee billing? Maybe I want to hire somebody. I want to bring somebody in. Maybe I want to focus on a marketing outcome. Here are all these problems that are bugging me, and you just dump and you put them all down, and that is that divergent thinking with the stakeholders. You post-it notes on the wall, dumping them all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen this ironically, not to like reference my dad again, but he does it. He's a product manager and he does this with his team. They meet once a quarter and they cover their walls in
Yeah.
their conference room with big sheets of butcher paper. And one side is the problem board and the other side is the solution board. And they spend an hour like, okay, everybody, here's your marker. Go right over on the problem board, write whatever problem you can think of that we're addressing with this product. And they go wild. He's taking pictures of them for me, and they are the whole paper is covered. And it's crazy to see how different brains come up with different ideas. So definitely bringing in different people gives you different perspectives. Like it opens up your eyes to different things. Super
Yeah.
helpful.
And give yourself permission to just unload. One of the things that's
Yeah.
that's hard with this particular approach is that it doesn't often work like this. The way it often works is you're just walking around out in the world. So I carry a Moleskine notebook with me. It's a common cliche with writers that will buy Moleskine notebooks and then like fill 3 pages and then buy another one. We we have this tendency to have way more, and it's true. Don't talk to my wife about it. She's quite upset about the number of Moleskine notebooks I buy. But yeah, so I've got like a bunch of those, and just carry a notebook around with you. So the brainstorming process doesn't necessarily have to be, and probably shouldn't be, just a sit down. Again, get curious, notice things. Somebody asked Seth
Mm-hmm.
Godin one time, what's his job? He said, my job is to notice things. Just notice things. Carry a notebook around with you. All the things that irritate you, put them down, and then in one organized session, sit with whoever the stakeholders are. You can go back to your notebook and certainly unload all those things, because the next phase we'll talk about is how to prioritize which of those problems you want to solve.
Right. The next phase is the define phase, right? Where you go into the how might we questions.
That's right. So now you're focusing, and the way I like to do this is, so you've got a post-it note explosion up on a wall,
Mm,
and you
hmm.
have different rubrics that like scoring systems that matter to you, right? So I'll give you
Right.
an example. At one point, I was talking to my friend Jess, and we were talking about how to grow her firm. And I've written about this elsewhere, but I don't think it's in here. How to grow her firm. And the problem that she kept running into was that people wanted employment manuals. They wanted employee manuals. And she had a whole bunch of other problems that she could solve. But in that rubric, like, she was trying to think of how to come up with new revenue. That was a measure that mattered to her. And
Mm,
I said, well, that's great. If that's a thing that matters to you, put a dollar sign on the post-it notes that correlate to that, and then move the ones that have, if that is a thing that matters to you, move those up to near the top. And she also cared, for example, about being client responsive. One of the things that really bugged her about that particular problem that she decided to end up solving was that they kept asking, she kept having to say no. So that was coming up over and over again and was making for
mm,
bad service experiences. So for the sake of it could make more money, for the sake of it was responsive to needs that they kept seeing coming up, you might focus on, is this something that we could solve fairly quickly? Is this something that has high impact in some other way? Like, this is an early stage thing that will really impact our clients, for example, so that they love us early and stick with us early. The point is, you need to figure out for yourself, what are the factors that matter for you, and you can turn them into a score. Just turn them into a 1 to 5 score in the different categories. And so you can go on your post-it notes and you can put, 4 categories, and this is a 1 and this is a 2 and this is a 5 and this is a 2, and then add them up. And based on adding up those scores, you can move those post-it notes up at the top and get to the top one. But the key thing is, you have to decide. Nobody can decide but you. What are the factors that matter? And then use that to drive which one you prioritize. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, not that those problems can't be readdressed at a later time, keep them in your back pocket because once you solve that one problem, you're going to come back to the drawing board and solve another one. But definitely narrowing it down to your one big thing that you're going to solve or fix during this quarter or chunk of time. So, now we've gone through the discovery phase, we've defined it. Now we move into the next phase, which is the development phase, where we
Yeah,
target pains and gains.
right. Absolutely. And I would say before we move on to that, I think it is fair for you to make money a prioritization. I'm a
Mm,
big fan of, think about anytime you download an app on your phone or whatever, within,
yep.
3 minutes, you've got a win, right? So give yourself ways to get quick wins. I think if you're going to do this process for the first time and you're going to really be deliberate about this process, finding ways to get quick feedback loops is really good because it'll just keep you moving and it'll keep you going, right? One other
Definitely.
one other thing I did want to say about this process. There's a phrase from Peter Senge, the guy who wrote the Fifth Discipline, and we always talk about the big thing we want to go do, the big thing we want to go accomplish. And we do this with our law firms. We'll go to a conference and we get all the big ideas and we're like, oh my gosh, I could be this person who's up on the stage and do all the things. And that creates a certain kind of tension. But his point was that often doesn't create the kind of tension that gets you to actually do things. And his point that he said that I found really interesting was the if there's a string between what is now and what could be,
Mm,
talking about what could be is not the only way to pull that string tighter or that rubber band tighter,
right.
right? By
Right.
understanding what is current, what is now, you also pull that string. And it's the tension in that string or in that rubber band that gets you to take action. So the nice thing about starting with a problem is you're starting with what's real right now, right? Really getting a
Right.
hold of what's going on right now that's bugging the crap out of you so that when you go into this next diamond into this next phase and say all right, let's fix that, you are primed, right? You are ready to give a crap.
Right.
So sorry, go ahead.
Not that I was just gonna say, just to, I mean, we talked a little bit about this last time. Like, people are more responsive to pain and fear than they are to motivation. So
Right,
having those two type points, like when you move into this next phase, the development phase, already having that pain poked and agitated, like you're going to be more motivated to solve it and figure out ways to get to that end result quicker because that pain is so
right.
prominent in your brain, like it's relevant. So
Yeah,
with that, moving into the development phase, we're going to target the pains and the gains that come from having that and the jobs that need to be done or can be done to fix it.
that's right. So, interestingly, to reflect what you talked about with your dad, now we're creating another
Yeah,
board with the solutions because the solutions are
right.
sort of independent from the problems, except for the one. So you'll take that one post-it note that you decided this is the thing, and you'll put that up at the top of the board so that you're just again pulling that side of the string, that side of the rubber band. You're really focused on this one thing, and so now you're going to do the same thing where you just unload. I mean, you just unload crazy, right? What are the ways that we can solve this thing? The one thing that I would say is helpful talking about pains, gains, and jobs to be done is you're developing one of the things that I talked about in this Clio piece, which again is just at clio.com/new normal, is you're trying to do this for somebody, right? You're trying to solve a
Mm-hmm.
problem for somebody. And so one of the ways that you can define whether your solutions are useful to that person is what are the pains that they're dealing with this problem, what are the gains they want to have out of it, what are the jobs to be done that they care about. When you get a hold of those three ideas, now you'll start to dump. I mean, you're just brain dumping ideas all over the place of things that you can do. And so you're throwing everything against the wall of options, right? And they could be crazy. Like, if you need to get a bucket across the yard, you could have dogs with reindeer antler things tied to their head pulling. I have no idea, right? Like, just go
Like the
nuts.
Grinch, you could have Max there.
Like Mac. Yes, exactly. God,
I was
see,
following you.
see.
We got this. We
You
got
know, you
this.
guys could come up with really anything. Just put it. It's got to be a judgment free zone because again, unless you're going to come up with a bunch of bad ideas, you're not going to come up with a good idea. So dump them all, dump
Yeah.
them all, dump them all. Make sure you're focused if you can on a person, on the pains, gains, and jobs to be done that they have. But dump, just dump. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes having that freedom makes you feel a little less, um, there's less pressure there, right? You're able to like really express yourself. But in, but also sometimes those ideas that you think are, oh my gosh, this is so crazy and outlandish, or this is the dumbest thing I've ever like suggested as the solution to this problem, could actually be the best solution to that problem. But you would have never gone there or even thought about it unless you had given yourself that
That's
grace
right.
to just
I mean, the reindeer
unload.
dog, like we could all come back to that.
It feels like a really good option to
Seems
move
obvious.
things across the yard.
Seems
So I'm
obvious.
just saying, I feel like I need to go get a dog now.
Yeah, and the
So,
final thing, you're going to do something similar to what you did before. So now you've got a bunch of post it notes
yep,
on a wall with a bunch of potential solutions. There was divergent thinking, it was unloading thinking, it was analytical thinking. You might even do research in these phases. So sometimes they'll go over time. You might not be able to just do the 15-minute brain dump. You might even research what are some options? What are some other law firms doing? Or what are some other businesses? How can I read some books that take me into totally different industries and into different business models and give me some other way of thinking about this? Like you're doing analytical thinking. It's not just a brain dump, it's a brain dump plus exploration, right? You're putting everything that you can come up with up on the board and give yourself the space to do that. But then what you're going to do is another prioritization step where, again, you're just going to figure out these are the things that matter to me, and I'm going to score these particular ideas based on those things that matter. So, for example, you might ask, like, what resources do we have currently? Like, if I'm scoring at 1 to 5, how much can we do this ourselves, and how much will we need other people to do it? Right. So if it's a thing we can totally do ourselves, and we've got the resources now, maybe you score that at a 5. If you've got to get a ton of help to make this thing happen, maybe you score it at a 1 if that's the thing that you're worried about. Maybe you think about the
mm,
cost to chase this thing down. Maybe you whatever the thing is that you decide this problem, can it be done quickly? What's the time horizon look like to fix this problem? Does it feed the business model downstream? Is there some other way? Like, can we repurpose this in some way? Maybe that's a factor that matters to you. But find your factors. Find, we'll say, 4 factors again, and score them in that 1 to 5 way on the post it note, and then just add the total score and let that score be the thing that dictates which post it note you move to the top. And when you're done with this process, you now have a post it note with the problem and a post it note with the solution, and you have a plan for your 12-week year. You have a plan for the next quarter.
right. So, and then you can land on your XYZ statement, which is the we do X for Y, so that Z,
Yeah, you see that a
right?
lot with design folks. Like in the end, when they have a solution, that they
Yeah,
Amazon does this famously. They'll create the
they
sales
do.
sheet before they go make a product or whatever. They will create the product description and sales sheet for it, right? So it'll
Right.
list
Yep.
off their typical sales sheet. They'll try to sell it before it exists. And one of the things that they use for that is we do X for Y so that Z, meaning we solve this particular problem for this particular person so that they can go do this particular thing. If you can voice it that way, if you can explain it that way, you've got the why that Nietzsche talked about, right? You know your why, and then you'll go figure out the how in some of the design, source, build, deliver things that we talk about in the book and elsewhere. But the key right now is that this process will move you from I have an infinite number of possibilities to I'm gonna a problem. This is my problem. This is the problem I care about. And then over to this is the solution that I'm going to go operate on. And then we'll talk about how you operationalize that for a 12-week period.
Right. I think it also helps you to, I don't know if everyone else is similar to, I think we're both this way, but like I have what I like to refer to as squirrel tendencies. So like I'll be like, oh, I have this problem. I'm gonna really focus on it. And then something else will come up. I'm like, oh, I've got to go fix it. Oh crap, I forgot about this thing over here. So then I'm trying
Yeah.
to balance like too many plates.
This
So
process
having,
is really good for my ADD because it makes it so I give myself permission to, like, when you get in the middle, and we'll talk about this when we're into the 12-week year, you're going to get into the middle.
yeah,
And you know, I don't want to be doctrinaire about this. You could certainly say, okay, I'm done, right? Like, this thing isn't working. I don't like doing this. And certainly, you know, you don't want to have too many sunk costs. But I really feel like a quarter is the right amount of time to invest in and just finish it. Whatever you decided you mapped out to do in that quarter, just finish it. Because that middle, that dip, that place where you're like, I hate everything and I don't know if I want to keep doing this, that's going to happen whether you have a good idea or not, right? That
right.
time is going to
Yep.
come. And the nice thing about that quarterly rhythm is it gives my ADD permission to say, okay, you just got to get to the end, right? You're probably in this middle phase. You're probably just bored. You're probably just being an angry child, a hungry, angry baby. Just finish the thing. It's just a
Pushed.
quarter. Get the stupid thing done, and it'll make a huge difference. And I cannot tell you, in writing the book Lawyer Forward, how many times I had that conversation with myself. You're being a baby. Get the stupid thing done. So that's how you get really harmful self talk, is how you get things done, people. That's the lesson.
Perfect. And then you go and talk to your therapist about it. Yes. Lesson learned right here.
That's where all the money goes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I wanted,
So I guess,
before we part, I as we wrap this conversation up, and just so you guys know, this
yeah.
conversation will be in will stay here in Facebook. It will also go on YouTube. It will be over in the Mighty Networks group. We're going to continue to do these conversations here until the NADA conference starts in late June, and then we'll move them over to there privately. But in the meantime, you know, we want to get everybody, whether you come to the NADA conference or not, and get that guided coaching, that you can make progress through these steps. So just FYI, this will stay up. But before we part, I just wanted to tell you, like, for me, I've been facing this same issue of figuring out, how do I, with, you know, I've got essentially two businesses, but there are an infinite number of things that we could do. I mean, we just went from
Yeah.
having me to, we've got me now and 4 team members, and like,
Yep.
Lord, I mean, we could do anything. We could come up with all kinds of stuff, and opportunities are starting to come to us from all over the place, which is just weird because I used to have to chase them, but then once you're like, I want to focus, then you're just inundated. And anyway, so I had to figure out what I needed to do for this business, and through that process of figuring out what's the problem I want to solve, for me, the problem I wanted to solve was I we needed more revenue. That's our problem for this year. We focused on revenue for this year. And the way to generate more revenue for us is in finding new buyers, right? New legal tech companies that can hire us to help create content for them. And
Right.
so that was the problem I wanted to focus on, was those conversations, making those conversations start. And for me, when I prioritized, having conversations really matters to me. And so I was trying to figure out, well, how do I get those conversations to happen? How do I prime them? And it's writing a manifesto. I talked about this in the 90-Day Known Expert series on the podcast. Writing a manifesto is how I'm going to solve this. So I just told my team a couple days ago that in a couple weeks, I'm going to disappear for an entire week. I'm just
Week.
disappearing so
Yeah.
that I can just go write this thing, and nobody can stop me. So that's what I'm going to
Yeah.
do. I'm going to write a manifesto. If you guys want help with that kind of thing, creating a piece of content that's like a, you know, this is going to be about a 10,000 word piece, because that's doable in a quarter. I'm going to be walking through that process myself over this quarter. I encourage you to do the same if you're thinking of some way to create conversations with potential buyers. It's a nice way to turn that engine. You might come up with other things like Jess. You might figure out outsourcing so that you can create a new product that didn't exist. There's all kinds of things that you can come up with. But by doing this process of brain dumping, focusing, you'll get there faster. Make sure that you go to clio.com/new normal. You can download that thing. Anything else to add?
Yep. I was gonna say, if you're interested in joining us and continuing these conversations past June 24th, then head over to lawyerforward.com/not a conference and grab your seat so that you can come be a part of these conversations and the discussions that are happening, and get access to all these interviews like Brian Clark that's coming up this next week about projects. It's Yeah, it's a place that's happening over there. So we would love to see you be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you, Tegan. I appreciate you guys hanging out.
Yeah.
It is Friday, so I am going to go. Apparently, I'm doing some cleaning so that my son can have some
Oh,
friends over, apparently. So, I
sounds
don't
like
know.
he should be
That's what I
cleaning.
said. But that is what I'm doing now. We'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks, Tegan.
Okay, see ya.